You have a copy. Doc, you have a copy? You have a copy.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Okay. We asked this, why things weren't there. We asked the question yesterday why it is, same question we asked him about the Tetzaveh. How do we understand that the Iker Kabbalah Torah was at the time of Purim and not at the time of Matan Torah? And we know that in Vata Tetzaveh we explained the Indian Mesiras Nefesh. So, we asked that question in Ois Aleph at great length. Right? And the Rebbe emphasized the Indian that we didn't see in Vata Tetzaveh of Mordechai teaching the children. That the Mesiras Nefesh was dafka through Mordechai, which we did of course see in Vata Tetzaveh. That was the whole Indian in Vata Tetzaveh. And as opposed to Vata Tetzaveh, over there, the Geish was really our avoid of Mesiras Nefesh. Here, the Rebbe wants to explain the Indian of Torah. V'tzarich la'avin, or his base. Nekudas abir ba'maimer hu. The basic explanation in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. That specifically at the time of the Gezerah of Haman was the deepest Kabbalah Torah. Because of Mesiras Nefesh. Now, I was going to ask a number of questions. In Vata Tetzaveh, the Rebbe didn't ask any questions about that. He said, move on, Me'elav. It has to be Mesiras Nefesh. Yeah, that's Dafka, that point, the Rebbe is going to try to understand. And that has something to do with the different emphasis in the two Maimar. Over there, the emphasis is on our Avodah. It's mitzad our Avodah. It's obvious why Mesiras Nefesh is the most important thing. The other Rebbe is going to be looking at things from a different vantage point. So then we'll ask, so why is Mesiras Nefesh necessary? Umana Geya Kan. She's Editors Mesiras Nefesh Shalem. Haisai de Mordechai. Why is it relevant here that the arousal of their Mesiras Nefesh was dafka through Mordechai? That's one question. Usheikar avedasa shel Mordechai haisa limud haTorah im tineka shel beis Rabban, and that the ikar aved of Mordechai was learning Torah with children. Those are two things that the Rebbe mentioned in the previous chapter from the Friedrich Rebbe's mind, which again were not. The idea of it coming through Mordechai was definitely very important in Vata Tetzaveh. But in Vata Tetzaveh, the Rebbe basically ignored the whole idea of teaching the children. It came up in some context, but it was not in any way, shape, or form the Ikar. So here the Rebbe asks, why Aleph do we have to know that the Mesiras Nefesh is through Mordechai? And base, what's the relevance of Mordechai teaching the children Dafka? V'gam tzarich bir, we also have to explain. V'masha kosev, ba'diuk, b'ascholas ha'maimer. The careful reading that's at the beginning of the Maimer, the Zeh sheb'matan Torah hayu Yisrael b'tachlis ha'ilui. Right, at the time of Matan Torah, the Jews were on the highest level. B'zman ha'gezerah, in the time of the Gezerah, hayu b'tachlis ha'shiflis, they were on the lowest level. Now, in the Maimer, the Friedrich Rebbe said something that again we did not emphasize at all in Vata Tetzaveh, and here it's going to be a major focus of the Maimer. And what's that? Over there, the Friedrich Rebbe says, Hein begashmius v'hein beruchnius, both in gashmius and ruchnius. They were on the lowest level in gashmius, their lives were basically hefker, and they were on the lowest level in ruchnius. They were part of the party. And in Matan Torah, they were the highest level. In gashmius, they just got out of Mitzrayim. And the highest level in ruchnius, obvious. Okay. So Rebbe asks, the L'cha'ura, La diuk b'maimer, based on the careful reading in the Maimer, the heich yitochen, how could it possibly be? Shebezman shayu b'tachlis ha'ilui, ha'serach ha'schola, time when they were in the highest level, there was only a beginning of the acceptance. Ube'esh shayu b'tachlis ha'shiflis, and at the time when they were on the lowest level, as dafka isa Kabbalah, that's when there was the Kabbalah. Nageya, that's relevant. Ha'ilui v'shiflis, b'matzav ha'ruchni shalem. What's relevant is their spiritual state. What does their physical state got to do with it? Why does the Frierdiker Rebbe also include the physical state? They were on a low physical level or a high physical level. What difference does it make? We're talking about accepting the Torah, and accepting the Torah is Ninian and Ruchnias. Obviously, it affects our Gashmias, but it's in Ninian and Ruchnias. It's got to do with whether or not I'm yarud for in some low state because of some crazy guy who is ruling over us. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Where were they in Ruchnias? That's what matters. And yet, interestingly enough, the Frierdiker Rebbe says both. Ruchnias and Gashmias. V'lama maybe, the Rebbe asks, B'hamaymer, sha'ilu shebizman matan Torah v'shifla shebizman ha'gezera, that the loftiness at the time of matan Torah and the lowliness at the time of the gezera, gam b'gashmias. Why is that relevant? Third question. V'hinei, voice Gimmel, neisef le'diyukim d'liyil, in addition to the careful readings of earlier. Tzarech lahavin gam, we have to also understand gam b'teichen of biur, the content of the explanation, Sheba Maimer, Dezeh, Vekiblu haYehudim, that which the Yidden accepted the Torah, haYebizman Gezerah, that was at the time of the Gezerah, who, in other words, is going to ask a question about Mesiras Nefesh B'chlal. Sha'az hayelam Mesiras Nefesh al Torah and mitzvahs, and again, about the Tzav, we didn't question that. So, Mesiras Nefesh, move on, my love, Mesiras Nefesh. Right? But why? Well, in all fairness, the focus was on our Aveda. So there's no question that mitzad our Aveda, Mesiras Nefesh is the higher level, but here we're not focusing on our Aveda, we're focusing on the Indian of Kabbalah Torah itself, mitzad the Torah. Why is that necessary for Kabbalah Torah, as the Rebbe is about to say? Mipnei sha'az hayel and Mesiras Nefesh al Torah and mitzvahs, the lechura. One at first glance, hare berubam kekulam shel mitzvahs. Regarding the majority of the mitzvahs in the Torah, Ksiv, what does it say? Asher yaser some of them v'chai b'hem. Should live in them. V'loi sheyamus b'hem. Not that you should die by them. We emphasize staying alive. We emphasize being healthy. The famous story of the Tzemach Tzedek with his daughter-in-law, that she wasn't feeling well. It's in a Yom from Yud Shvat. The Yom of Yud. The Yom is the first book our Rebbe wrote, and it's Dafka Hashgacha Pratis that disappears on Yud Shvat, talking about a healthy body. That the Rebbe tells the story of the Rebbe and Rivka used to daven quickly in order to eat because the doctor said she had to eat early in the morning. And the Rebbe told her, when the Rebbe found this out, the Rebbe told her that she should eat before davening. Better to eat in order to daven than daven in order to eat. And the Rebbe also said it's very important that you be healthy. Right? The Rebbe talked about the importance of it talked about the importance of health. So mitzvahs are about being healthy. Mitzvahs are about doing avodah in Eilam Hazeh. And if we're not healthy, how can we do avodah in Eilam Hazeh? That doesn't mean we have to all run marathons. But it's still, if you can, that means you're probably in pretty good shape. Okay. I can walk 26 steps. I don't know whether I can run 26 miles, but I can walk 26 steps. I complain after the 23rd, but that's a separate issue. Probably Yaakov was a little sore after the 23rd mile also, but he kept going. Right? There's a point where you break through, right? And then you just float. That's what they say. I don't know. It's something I assume I'll never experience. Right? Okay, so mitzvahs are about being alive. Right? V'gam, this is something we didn't deal with at all in Vatat Tzav. V'gam, Gimmel mitzvahs. Regarding the three mitzvahs, shenemar behem, that those three mitzvahs are mitzvahs, a yerag val yavar. What are those three mitzvahs? What are the mitzvahs you have to give up your life for? Avodah Zarah, murder, and adultery, right? Those are the three mitzvahs that rather than transgress the mitzvah, you have to give up your life. Okay, now there's all sorts of laws in in the whole union of Kiddush Hashem. This is more about Kiddush Hashem than Mesiras Nefesh per se, right? It's Kiddush Hashem. And there are times when you have to be Mekadeshim Shemayim and give up your life, even when it's something relatively minor, if it's done publicly and it's obvious that the reason the person wants you to transgress is to show everybody the Torah is not important. Okay, Beseder. But the three major mitzvahs that require Mesiras Nefesh are Shvichas Damim, Gili Orayas, and Avodah Zarah. Okay. So the Rebbe says, even relative to them, the whole notion of Mesiras Nefesh by those mitzvahs is shaykh to the performance of the mitzvah. That what? Who afilu im yerag al yidei said, that you even have to give up your life for it. But that's not the ikar expression of the mitzvah. The ikar expression of the mitzvah, or it's all negative commandments, is not to do this. Right? The Eibusher didn't say don't worship idols in order to bring about a situation that you'd have to be Mesiras Nefesh. The Eibusher said don't worship idols because you shouldn't worship idols. And how is it ad kedei kach, in order to fulfill that mitzvah, what might have to happen? You might even have to give up your life in order to fulfill the mitzvah. But that's how most people fulfill the mitzvah of the Yisra of Avodah Zarah. What be done? Just don't serve idols. What's it got to do with Yerag Val Yavar? When did anybody ever tell you to serve an idol? So Beseder, so you don't serve idols. What's it got to do with Mesiras Nefesh? Right? It's true that if push comes to shove, you're even supposed to give up your life for these three. But that's not the Ikar Mitzvah. The Ikar Mitzvah is not to do these activities. And then the Rebbe continues, "Va mitzvah the Mesiras Nefesh al Kiddush Hashem, Yirag mitzvahos." It's one mitzvah in the Torah. One mitzvah, learn from Sugim, that there's an idea to give up your life for Torah mitzvahs. Umau hechrich, therefore the Rebbe asked, then what's the need? Absolute necessity. Ad kedei kach that there's no Kabbalah Torah until the time of Purim. What's the necessity for Mesiras Nefesh? Bishvil Kabbalah, the Klolos Torah, Vekiblu haYehudim. Why is that necessary? So now the Rebbe is going to ask a question of what he just asked. Because of Tanya, and that which it says in Tanya, in the parak of Mesiras Nefesh, Perek Chavei, that Tam al Zeh, not the only parak, but it's the parak you remember. Meaning, when people say, where's Tanya talk about Mesiras Nefesh, you say Perek Chavei. That Tam al Zeh should see for Moshe Rabbeinu, the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu commanded Lador Shenichnasu La'aretz, the generation that was entering into Eretz Yisrael, Likros Kriya Shema Pamayim B'chol Yom. Moshe Rabbeinu said that you have to read Kriya Shema in the morning, you have to read Kriya Shema at night. Why? Lekabel alav Malchus Shemayim, to accept upon themselves the yoke of heaven, b'Mesiras Nefesh, B'chol Nafshecho, even if they take your nefesh. Right? B'chol levav, b'chol nafshecho, fil netes nafshecho. Even if they take your nefesh, you have to serve the Eibusher. So how can you say that this isn't something very central? Because after all, the Rebbe just said that it's actually one mitzvah, and it's not shaykh to most mitzvahs. And even those mitzvahs that it is shaykh to, that's not the ikar kiyum of the mitzvah. That just happens to be a prat. It's one of the details. If it push comes to shove, you also have to give up your life for these mitzvahs. And there's one mitzvah called Kiddush Hashem. If that's the case, so why did the Alter Rebbe say what he said about Kriya Shema? Kriya Shema, twice a day. What do we say? We say Mesiras Nefesh for all of the mitzvahs. Mesiras Nefesh for our relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu B'Klal. Kabbalah Soul. So how could I have asked that question? Right? Moshe Rabbeinu commands the Jewish people to be makabel el malchus shemayim, the Mesiras Nefesh, b'chol nafshecha. Even though shivtiach lehem, he also promised them, pachtechem u'merachem yiten Hashem alevechem, that the Eibusher is going to give your fear and your dread on these people. So don't worry, they're not going to fight you. Meaning you're not going to have your Mesiras Nefesh before mamish, right? They're not going to fight you. You're just going to go through your conquering Eretz Yisrael like a hot knife through butter. So don't worry about that. So then what exactly is Moshe Rabbeinu telling the Yidden? That's because the performance of Torah and mitzvahs is dependent on this. On what? Sheyizkar Tomid. That one should always remember. Inyan Mesiras Nafsh L'Hashem. Is the Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh. So how can I say that the Rebbe's asking a question on himself? How can I ask these questions on the Friedrich Rebbe where I'm saying Mesiras Nefesh is not the ikar of the Torah? Adarabah, it's a v'chai b'hem relative to most mitzvahs. The Indian is v'chai b'hem to dafka be and elam hazeh and be healthy and do what has to be done and not give up your life, not die by them, live by them. So then how can I say what I say when Moshe Rabbeinu, the Balatanya tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yidden to say Kriya Shema twice a day in order to reach the state of Mesiras Nefesh for Torah and mitzvahs. So of course it's necessary. He explains that when Moshe Rabbeinu asked that of us, and when the Alter Rebbe explained it, how the Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh, Shabbat Talu Yakim Torah Mitzvahs, the Inyan of Mesiras Nefesh, that upon which the whole notion of the performance of Torah Mitzvahs depends, Mesiras Nefesh B'Keach, it's potential Mesiras Nefesh, is that a Jew comes to a point where he says that if I have to, I'll give up my life. Shebeim yitztarach l'mesiras nefesh al kim Torah mitzvahs. That if it's required mesiras nefesh for performing mitzvahs, hu muchan l'zeh, he's ready for this. That's what he's asked to do by saying Kriya Shema every day. But what? For mesiras nefesh fail, he's not asked to actually give up his life. It's not happening. Varegam b'matan Torah, also matan Torah, there was a mesiras nefesh b'kayach. What's that? Nasa v'nishma. So if we're saying that Mesiras Nefesh is necessary for the Kabbalah of Torah, and that Mesiras Nefesh is potential Mesiras Nefesh, well, that happened in Matan Torah. So what's the Chiddush of Purim? Right, in Matan Torah also we said Nasa v'nishma, which was akin to saying that we're willing to give up our lives in order to fulfill whatever has to be fulfilled. There's no Chiddush in Purim. If the Mesiras Nefesh we're talking about is potential, which is the Mesiras Nefesh we're talking about when Moshe Rabbeinu tells us to say Kriya Shema. Right? V'harei b'matan Torah, k'shamru nasa v'nishma, when we said nasa v'nishma, umikol shekein lachar shenitztavu likros Kriya Shema pamayim b'chol yom, and all the more so after they had been asked to say Kriya Shema twice a day, which is only 40 years later, and Purim is 500 years after that, more, 800 years after that. They accepted upon themselves to perform everything that they've been commanded to do. Even if they need Mesiras Nefesh. So they accepted Mesiras Nefesh b'koyach at the time of Matan Torah, and yes, also Kriya Shema. But now the Rebbe is answering the question with the question. Therefore, clearly, when Chazal say that the Friedrich Rebbe brings a different drasha from Vekiblu haYehudim, Chazal bring it for Vekiblu, that they accepted the Torah more fully at the time of Purim than the time of Matan Torah. It had to do with Mesiras Nefesh b'foil, in actuality, because Mesiras Nefesh b'kayach there already was. Potential Mesiras Nefesh there was. They accepted upon themselves that if push came to shove and they had to give up their lives for Torah, they would. They said that in Matan Torah, and they said that when they said Kriya Shema every day. And they already, we learned earlier that they already knew about Kriya Shema. In the early years, yes, Kriya Shema is in Devarim, which is in year 40. But how do we know they knew about Kriya Shema, even at the beginning of their sojourn in the desert? We talked about this once. It's a riddle. Dun, 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 dun.
Well, when they took the lambs and to slaughter them,
They were told to do that. That's not Kriya Shema. That's not Kriya Shema.
Oh,
Korach. What was one of Korach's claims against Moshe Rabbeinu?
why did he think he was better than everybody else?
Made a number of halachic claims. One was the tzitzis, the skulat chelis require tzitzis, the beged, the skulat chelis, the tzitzis need chelis. What was another? Bias Malay Svar, there's a need a mezuzah. A house full of books, there's a need a mezuzah. Where do we learn about mezuzah?
Krishna.
Krishna. How did Karak know about a mezuzah? Obviously, they knew about Krishna. So Moshe Rabbeinu said it over publicly in Devarim, but obviously they knew something about Krishna. Something about the information in Krishna, if not the Psukim themselves. How do we know? Well, the Karyach's asking about Bias Malay Svarim, and the only mention of a mezuzah in the Torah are the first two chapters of Krishna. Right? One from Beschana and one from Eikim. That's where we learn it, both in Devarim. Tzitzis, so that's Meraglim. So they could know about tzitzis. So that's already the second year, right? Karak's after the Meraglim. But mezuzah? How do they know about mezuzah? Oh, so they must have known about Kriyashma. So they might have been saying Kriyashma all 40 years in the desert. When that's Mesiras Nefesh B'Kayim. So then, what do I need Purim for? There's already been Mesiras Nefesh. Well, what's the difference? Purim is Mesiras Nefesh B'Fail. They were mamish ready to give up their lives. They were giving up their lives. Their lives were hefker. They were going to be killed. Rahman al-Islam. That's different. Why is that necessary? That's what the Rebbe is asking. Kishamru Nasav Nishma Koshkin Lachash Nisav Likosh Kishma Pamayim B'chol Yom Kiblu Aleim L'Kayim Kol Mashi Yitztavim. They accepted upon themselves to do everything they were commanded. Gambim Yetzarech LeMesiras Nefesh Azel, even if it was necessary to be Mesiras Nefesh. That's called Mesiras Nefesh B'Koyach. And that's something every single one of us does every single day, twice a day. Vafal Pikein, nevertheless, for whatever reason, Loi Haisa Kabbalah Gemara, that was not a complete Kabbalah, Vekiblu haYehudim, Ad Lizman Gzeres Haman, until the time of Haman. Why? Because what was there then? Well, that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe says. Kishayalem Mesiras Nefesh B'Fail, when there was actual Mesiras Nefesh. Okay. Why? Why is that necessary? That's what the Rebbe is asking. What does it mean? Look at footnote 25. B'Sharayera, Little Rebbe. Shama. Little Rebbe's Drushim on Purim and Chanukah. Zeh shekabbalah sheb'matan Torah. That which the acceptance of the Torah, Matan Torah, Nigmara, was completed al Yidei Mesiras Nefesh B'Fail, by the actual Mesiras Nefesh, haYehudim may Purim, it was at the time of Purim, Av Shegam Kishamru Nasav Nishma. Even though that they had said Nasav Nishma, certainly they were ready to be made Nefesh B'Fail Mamish. So it's not that they came to some higher level by virtue of the fact that they said they were ready to do it, because when they said they were ready to do it, they meant it. Mamish, if that's what was necessary, they would do it. Hu mitzara mailid Mesiras Nefesh B'Fail. This is still relevant to the Mittel Rebbe says. The mile of Mesiras Nefesh in actuality. Why? Shemagia l'mayla ma'oid naila gam mitar mitzvahs. Because you touch a place in reality that's beyond Torah mitzvahs. What are you touching? Etzem and neshama, and etzem and neshama is beyond Torah mitzvahs. What came first, the neshama or Torah mitzvahs? Neshama came before Torah, right? It says two things preceded the creation of the world: Yisrael v'Raisa. Which of those came first? First Yisrael. Medrash, that's quoted in Chassidus all the time. Medrash in Tanit B'Eliyahu. That Bereshis Rabbah just says there are two things. Yisrael. That's the Medrash Rashi quotes in Chumash. Yisrael v'Raisa. But the Tanit B'Eliyahu asks which one of those is first, and the answer is Yisrael. The Kosav B'Torah Daber B'nai Yisrael. Clearly, the Torah is written already. There's, so to speak, already the Yidden when the Torah is written, because the Torah is speaking to the Jewish people. so to speak. Okay. So that means that the shorish of the Yid is higher than the shorish of the Torah. That doesn't mean the Yid can tell the Torah what to do. The Torah tells the Yid what to do down here. Okay. So that means that the Mesiras Nefesh takes us to a place beyond Torah and mitzvahs, and the Middle Rebbe says, and that's why Mesiras Nefesh b'feil is such an amazing thing. And the Rebbe asks a very simple question, because he's not giving up on this question in his mind. About tzarech biyur. Madua tzarech b'shvil Kabbalas HaTorah. Why is it, for the sake of Kabbalas HaTorah, tzarech lagir, you have to reach l'darga shel hamayla miTorah mitzvahs? Why do you have to reach a level beyond Torah and mitzvahs to accept the Torah? Why can't you just accept the Torah and the level of Torah and mitzvahs? It's Torah and mitzvahs. Oh, so even though the Middle Rebbe says what he says, and what he says is true, the Mesiras Nefesh takes us to a level of hamayla miTorah mitzvahs. Okay, good. Why is that necessary in order to be makabel the Torah? That's where the Rebbe is holding right now. Completely different than V'atit itself. Okay. Yeah? We have these questions? Lots of questions. Right? It's one more major issue that has to be explained before we get to V'yuvan ze b'hakdim Immerse Dalet. Start explaining things. V'hine, yedua. Sheb'shnei zmanim haisa Mesiras Nefesh b'feil. There were two times in the history of the Jewish people that there was a great expression of Mesiras Nefesh, Shel Klal Yisrael. Once it was take everybody, and once it was started with a small group of people, the Maccabim, but it spread to more people, even though it didn't spread to everybody. Mesiras Nefesh Shel Klal Yisrael, al Torah mitzvahs. When's that? B'Chanukah, b'Zman Gezeres Yovan, u'b'Purim, b'Zman Gezeres Yovan, u'b'Purim, b'Zman Gezeres Haman. Those are the two times when there was a general Mesiras Nefesh to overcome the opposition and keep connected to Torah and mitzvahs. Hanukkah and Purim. Now, I'm sure you've heard all sorts of ideas as to the difference between the two, but okay, that's important. But what's important is what the Rebbe says about it in this Maimon, because that's what we're learning. And we'll see that much later. The cave and Shekol in Yanim B'Torah, since all aspects of the Torah in B'Tachlis Adiyut are exact, Tzarech Leim, I have to say, that which the idea of Vekiblu Yehudim, haYedafka al Yedei Mesiras Nefesh to Purim, specifically through the Mesiras Nefesh of Purim, who must be loyrak, not only Mipnei she Mesiras Nefesh to Purim haisa lifnei Mesiras Nefesh to Chanukah, because Purim happened before Chanukah. Purim happened at the in between the first and second Beis Hamikdash. Hanukkah happened, in the middle, near the end of the Tkufa of the second Beis Hamikdash. So it was quite a few hundred years later. Okay, Seder. But that's not the real reason why it all happened in Purim and it didn't happen in Hanukkah, because if Hanukkah were more powerfully an expression of Kabbalas HaTorah, then Hanukkah would happen first. Right? What difference does it make? Right? The Eibusher can do whatever he wants. Okay, so he would have made Hanukkah happen first if it was really all about Hanukkah. But it's not really all about Hanukkah. It's really all about Purim. That particular aspect, Kabbalas HaTorah. Why? Both of them were times of Mesiras Nefesh. Elegam, the Mipnei she Mesiras Nefesh of Purim shayeches yoser l'gemar Kabbalas HaTorah. Because the Mesiras Nefesh of Purim is relevant, more relevant to the completion of the Kabbalas HaTorah. We have to figure that out. Why? But tzarech lahavin, have to understand. Achiluk, the difference between the Mesiras Nefesh to Chanukah and Mesiras Nefesh to Purim. What's the difference in the Mesiras Nefesh of those two holidays? Shemivnei chiluk zeh, as a result of this chiluk, hagemar, the Kabbalas HaTorah, the completion of the acceptance of the Torah, the dafka, the Mesiras Nefesh to Purim, specifically through Purim and not Chanukah. Because again, if Chanukah really is the event that should be Gemar Kabbalas HaTorah, then it would have been Gemar Kabbalas HaTorah. So would Purim have to move out of the way? So Purim will move out of the way. Well, there's no problem. The Yeshiva can do whatever he wants and orchestrate things as he sees fit. Okay, he happened to orchestrate things such that Purim came first. That's not the reason Purim is the Yikar Kabbalas HaTorah. Purim is the Yikar Kabbalas HaTorah because it is. And Mastama, that's why it came first. Right? The Rebbe brings a beer of the Mittler Rebbe in footnote 26, which I think at this point we'll skip. Maybe we'll come back to it, but rather than just put more information into the pot, let's just keep what we've got. Okay, so how many questions did we ask? What have we done? We've asked a lot of questions. So we asked, the first two questions were, why the emphasis on the fact that it comes through Mordechai, and why the emphasis on the children? Now again, the fact that you and I might understand why it comes through Mordechai because we learned out the Tetzaveh, that doesn't mean there's not a question. That's one of the questions about the Tetzaveh spends a great deal of time answering. Still a question. Okay, so now it is interesting. I mean, I've never seen anybody mention this, but it's 30 years punkt between the Maimer Vekiblu Yehudim, this Maimer, and Vata Tetzaveh. The Rebbe said, now again, the Rebbe was Magia at Tetzaveh in Tafshin Nun Beis, but the Rebbe said the Maimer in Tafshin Mem Aleph, which was 30 years after this Maimer, 30 years apart, these two points. So that the question is still a question. Right? And anyway, the Rebbe hasn't answered it yet because he only answers it 30 years. So you're right. So it's still a question. All right, so it's still a question. You also have to understand the idea, the third question that we asked in his base. Why is it that the emphasis is also on the shiftless mitzad gashmias? What does gashmias mean? They're accepting the Torah, so they were on a low spiritual level. That's what's nogeya. The fact that they're on a low gashmistic level, what is it? Okay. And in Gimmel, up until now, the Rebbe is that long paragraph which we learned is the basic nakuda. Why is Mesiras Nefesh necessary to be makabel the Torah? Right? Now, there's all sorts of different aspects of the question, but that's the question, and I have to be able to say when relative to that whole paragraph is about that question. All the details, okay, you'll remember the details. You won't remember the details, but you'll remember that that's what the paragraph is about. Then you can remember the mind. Right? And the fourth thing we saw was, why Dafka Purim and not Hanukkah? Right? Just really the fifth question, but the fourth idea. Right? This is not the first time we've seen 5 questions. Right? So Hanukkah, interesting, no? 5, which is really 4 also, because the first 2 are sort of put together. Okay. There's a question for every level of the neshama. Okay, so now we're ready to go. Now, right away, you notice a completely different direction than Vata Tetzaveh. Vata Tetzaveh is all about our haYehudim mitzad Mesiras Nefesh. This is all about why is Mesiras Nefesh after Torah, which means you have to understand Torah. This mimer is extremely famous for explaining in the most complete fashion imaginable 3 different levels of Torah, 3 different levels of mitzvahs, and 3 different levels of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And what those 3 levels are and how 3 different aspects of the performance of all of those is absolutely astounding. And if you ask anybody about Kibbutz Yud and Tafshin Yud, that's what they'll say. 3 levels of ... Right. That's Vekiblu Yud and Tafshin Yud. So let's see what the Rebbe is going to teach us. This can be understood haYedua, that which is known. And this is known. This is something that everybody knows. Anybody who's learned a little Chassidus, certainly from our generation, knows this. Shechidish to Matan Torah. The Chiddush of Matan Torah, Lagave, relative to a Torah mitzvah shayu kedem Matan Torah. We kept Torah mitzvahs for Matan Torah. The others kept Torah mitzvahs. So what do we need Matan Torah for? Just make it official. I don't know how you do that, but make it official. Okay, now everybody has to do this, not only holy people. Tell them what you're doing. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Tell them everything you do. Write it all down. You guys write it all down. Tell them this is what we do. We take a lulav and matzah, and, right? What did Lot give the Malachim to eat? When the Malachim came to Lot, what did he give them to eat? Matzah. Why? Not apparently. Why? Rashi on Chumash.
He observed the magnitude matzah. He had it lying around.
Wasn't it?
I mean, what you're saying is true, but it's so. I mean, why not just say what Rashi says? Pesach Hayah. It was Pesach. They showed up on Pesach. What was he eating? Matzah. It's not even. It wasn't that it was Shavuos and he had it lying around from Pesach. It was Pesach, and he was eating matzah. Lloyd. This is not. He's not at this point. He's not the firmest guy on earth, right? He's had a slight yurido. You know, he left Avram Avinu, left Yeshiva, and he went to. I don't know, where did he go? He went to Toledo, and he ended up in not in the best of shape. Okay, fine. He was eating matzah. Why? It's Pesach. So the opposite. Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim must be pretty short at the Seder in the time of Avram Avinu because it hasn't happened yet. Okay, but what do they tell? Oh, wow, there's going to be 10 plagues. What are they? Oh, it's going to be the coolest thing. I don't know. What did they do? I'm not sure. Okay, but they were Mekayim, Pesach, somehow. Tefillah, Shabbos, they were Mekayim the Torah. So then just tell people what you're doing and make it official. And now Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim can be easy. Not a problem. There's been a Yetzias Mitzrayim, so we can talk about it. But that's not the Chiddush of Matan Torah. Because you don't need a Matan Torah for most of the information. What do you need a Matan Torah for? Who? Second line. Mitzvah shel avos. Mitzvah shel avos. Ubechlal, in general, Kodem Matan Torah. Also the mitzvahs that the Yidden did in Mitzrayim. Shevet Levi. Hayurak Baruchnius. They're only in Ruchnius. They were elevated to a higher spiritual state by virtue of the mitzvahs that they did. But what? The mitzvahs didn't affect physical reality in any way, shape, or form. So if they had taken a lulav and an esrog, they could throw the lulav and the esrog in the garbage afterwards. It's not a problem. Now, in the Maisa today, you could also theoretically, you don't. But the idea of elevating something by virtue of using it for a mitzvah, changing the metaphysical character of a physical object, that didn't exist before Matan Torah. You can do something Avram Avinu couldn't do. What's an example? The piece of paper you're looking at. We've talked about this. The piece of paper you're looking at now has to go into Geniza. No, it doesn't have Shem on it. It doesn't have any holy names of the Avish. Why should it have to go into Geniza? Because it's Torah and a Jew learned it. These pieces of paper don't need Geniza. Why? No Jew learned them. There's no Shem here. So could I throw these in the garbage? Yes. Usually we don't anyway, but you could. Right? Whereas those can't be. The ones you have can't be thrown in the garbage. Why? Because you've elevated them. You've changed their metaphysical character by virtue of the fact that you learned them. That's a function of Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, that didn't happen. Physicality wasn't changed. The person was elevated by virtue of the holy act, but the physical object was not affected. The Noisef, now the I was going to explain this, that in addition to the fact, Shekama v'kama mitzvahs kimu rak baruchnius, there were a number of mitzvahs that they only did in ruchnius. I mean, they actually didn't do the mitzvah in gashmius. They did the mitzvah in some spiritual way. Like what? K'may tefillin. How did they put on tefillin? Shenizkar behem yitzias mitzrayim va'az adayin lo yagolus mitzrayim. So obviously the tefillin that we wear, they didn't put on. But they did tefillin in an oifen ruchni. So how did Yaakov Avinu do tefillin? The whole story with the stripes on the sheep. So that was all being Mekayim, the inyan of tefillin in ruchnius. They wasn't putting on physical tefillin. It's what was going to be written in the physical tefillin. Right? There's always that question asked about the tefillin for the first 40 years in the desert before Devarim, because two of the parshas are Shema Yisrael and Vayim Shemeya. So what was in the tefillin? Well, now that we see that diuk in the Rebbe, where the Rebbe says that clearly they knew about Kriya Shema right at the beginning, because Karach was kvetching about something that's written in Kriya Shema. So maybe they had Kriya Shema, they could write it in their tefillin. It just hadn't been explained the way Moshe Rabbeinu explained it in Devarim. Kriyashman Devarim is quite wild, as Moshe says, when the Sadi Esav B'Sadcha. Moshe is talking, I gave grass in your fields. You gave grass in our fields? Meaning, obviously, it's sort of referring to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but I mean, it's Moshe Rabbeinu talking. Okay. So, in addition to that, Hine Gamba mitzvah shekimu b'gashmis. End of the fourth line. Even the mitzvahs that they fulfilled in Gashmis. Haisam shachas a kedusha. The drawing down of holiness was rak beruchnis. Was only in spiritual terms. V'loy b'davar gashmi shebay kimu mitzvah. And not in the physical object that the mitzvah was performed with. So a physical object wasn't elevated to a state of kedusha. Ki koydem matan Torah, because before matan Torah, and this is the most important part of the whole equation, haisa gezeda. There was a decree. Why there was a decree, I have no idea, but there was a decree. And what was the decree? Ha'elyonim lo yardu lamata v'tachtenim lo yalu lamayla. The upper realms will not descend to the lower realms, and the lower realms will not ascend to the upper realms. Chazal. It's a Medrash Chazal. Shmeis Rabbah. It's in the Tanchuma. Bring a mashal. Melech Roimi lo yered l'suri. L'suria, Melech Suria lo yala l'roimi. So too, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, there'll be two different realms. There'll be a realm of physical reality and a realm of spiritual reality, and never the twain shall meet. That was reality until Matan Torah. And Matan Torah broke that reality. Mevatel that gezerah. And what does it say in the Medrash? It's a Medrash Chazal. It's not Chassidus. It's a Medrash Chazal. Shmeis Rabbah and Ve'im. What does it say in the Medrash? The Kadosh Baruch Hu says, we're going to break that gezerah. Ani askil, and I'll begin. Kamesh Kosev v'yered havaya al Har Sinai. Kadosh Baruch Hu descended on Har Sinai. In other words, the two realms will now exist in harmony, one with the other, and physicality can be a place of tremendous kedusha. V'lochem, since there was such a gezeda, lo yachibur the kedushas ha-mitzvah, there wasn't a connection between the holiness of the mitzvah, El Yonim, which is a reality from the upper realms, God's will, Imadavar Gashmi, Shabaynasas a mitzvah, in with the physical object that the mitzvah was performed with, which is Tachtenim, the lower realms. Mashain came became a mitzvah shalachem matan Torah. That's not the case. Once we do mitzvahs after matan Torah, things change completely. Kashabatla gezerah, when the gezerah was nullified, v'mechitza, and the separation shebein elyonim l'tachtenim was done away with. Nasa chibur shel davar gashmi. Now there's a connection and a joining together of the davar gashmi sheboy mekayim mitzvah im kedushas mitzvah, with the holiness of the mitzvah. Va'ad, to such an extent, become a mitzvah regarding a number of mitzvahs. Nasa davar gashmi chafetza shel mitzvah. The davar gashmi becomes actually an object of mitzvah. It becomes a mitzvah object. It's been transformed into a mitzvah object. Right? The only mitzvah object that existed before Matan Torah was Bris Milah. That was the only mitzvah that was given from above. And that one of the explanations in Chassidus as to why is it that Avraham Avinu was Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula and he wasn't Mekayim the inner mitzvah, Bris Milah? Oh, because he wanted one mitzvah to come from above. One mitzvah should come from above and be a mitzvah like one of the mitzvahs after Matan Torah, and that would be an asinus koyach. That would be something that would allow Avraham Avinu to give the koyach to do that action to all of his children, meaning us. That we would be. How is it that you and I have the koyach to fulfill a mitzvah of the Eibishter? Avraham Avinu fulfilled the mitzvah of Bris Milah. Was the only object of kedusha in the world At that point, Avraham Avinu's bris milah. When Eliezer had to take an oath, he has to hold on to a chefs shel kedusha. He has to hold on to a holy object. Today we hold on to a sefer Torah. What did he hold on to? The bris milah of Avraham Avinu, because that was the only holy thing in the world. It's the only holy physical object in the world. Wow. Because that was a mitzvah that came from above. The Eibishter told him to do it. It wasn't that he figured it out himself. Okay. Even though Mustami had figured it out himself, but he waited. So that's Matan Torah. That's the Kiddush of Matan Torah. That we can change physical reality. Look at footnote 31. Very important. Val derech zeh, similarly, the Rebbe says, with Torah. Not just in mitzvahs, also in Torah. Shedafke b'matan Torah, specifically by Matan Torah, Nitan HaKoyach, was given the power, Shelimud Torah, that the learning of Torah, Yifol Shinui Ba'adam Alimda, can bring about a change in the person who learns it. Now, it doesn't always. A person can learn Torah and it doesn't change them, ki huzeh, because they don't let it. It's just a bunch of it's just more information, right? Or a person can allow Torah to bring about a real change in who they are, how they relate to people, how they relate to reality, how they relate to themselves, everything in their life can change. Why? Matan Torah. Before learning Torah would be like learning biology, just be information. Right? Elo, after the Marmakir is there, Elo she'ikar inyan said, the essential expression of the difference between before and after Huba mitzvahs. Right? That's really in mitzvahs. And the Rebbe gives a Marmakir for that too. Look over there and you'll see. Right? Okay. But Torah also? How is it the Torah can affect us? Doesn't matter the Torah. Torah also came down into Olam Hazeh. Otherwise, Torah would just be this lofty conceptual information. So, a person learns physics, right? So it's interesting. So it affects them. Meaning, obviously, anything you learn, so it helps you look at reality slightly differently. Okay, but it really brings about an essential change in your being. Well, not really. Certainly, learning philosophy doesn't, right? Go to any campus, the least moral people on campus are the philosophy professors. They're learning all these deep ideas, but they're a pretty raunchy crew, not living a life that is in any, obviously there are some, but your average guy is not living a life that is in any way, shape, or form in line with the ideals that he's talking about in his class. What's one got to do with the other? Right? Now a person can even do that to Torah. But it's possible not to do that. It takes work. But I remember once teaching in the Sen. They were making a bunch of racket. There were some girls in the corner making a bunch of racket. So I said, I don't understand. We're in the middle of doing something. This is, in the middle of a Veda here. What are you doing? So they look at me, Aveda? This isn't Aveda, this is class. They related to learning Chassidus exactly the same to reading biology. They had biology class in high school and they had Torah class in high school. What's the difference? It's all the same. Right? So today, what would it be? It would be, reading the internet. You read information on the internet. We learn Torah. It's all the same. It's a bunch of information. Torah is not information. Torah is elokus. When did Torah become elokus that can affect us? It's always elokus. When did learning Torah become something that could actually elevate us? After Matan Torah, the Lord says, what do you think? Amazing Kiddush. It's not the ideas. Right? And that's what's so important. It's not the ideas in Torah that elevate us. It's the godliness in Torah that elevate us. The ideas are amazing ideas. There's all sorts of amazing ideas. Right? A physicist could walk in here and tell us things about the physical nature of the world that would, and he could tell it within a religious context, right? He's a frum guy, and he's telling us the wonders of God. But it's not Torah. He's just telling us, you should just know this is out where we go, wow, that's just unbelievable. That is so amazing. That's so interesting. Okay, fine. And all within the context of the Niflaot Bareh, the wonders of the Creator. 100%. It's not Torah. So it's going to affect me differently. It's a fascinating piece of information. That's not the image. It's about him. It's not him. Torah is him. And that's what I have to develop, that sensitivity to Torah. Then I'm going to treat it differently. Right? I'm going to relate to it differently. So we can actually create a chefza shel mitzvah. Valpir yedua, based on that which is known. Whoever's quoting Tanya. Shachibur the shnei devarim hafchim. The bringing together, the joining together, the synthesis of two opposite things. Hu al yedei inyan shel lamayla mishneim is always through something that's beyond both of them. How can I bring two opposite realities into a state of synthesis, one with the other? Only if the koyach that's doing that is beyond both. The simplest mashal in the world is that always used if I have now these are two same things, but okay, but we know they're the same, but they still they repel each other. If you have two north poles in a magnet, okay, so now these two north poles naturally are opposites, right? Meaning they repel each other. Okay, now I want to bring them together. Well, that's easy if I'm more powerful than both of them. It's not hard at all, right? If the magnet is more powerful than me, then I can't do that. And there are magnets that are more powerful than me, right? There's magnets that you could pull a car across, from down the block, right? Okay. So that I get, but if it's a regular magnet that I bought in a store, right, that picks up, safety pins. Okay, so that magnet, I'm more powerful than that magnet. I have no problem whatsoever bringing those two opposites together because I'm beyond both. Okay, that's fine. So what is it that can allow Gashmias and Ruchnias to be brought together into a state of synthesis? Something beyond Gashmias and beyond Ruchnias. It's called God. Okay, so right, 100%. Now, but we have to understand that Ruchnias is God, right? When you say Al Yonim, you're talking about a godly reality. So there's something beyond that godly reality. I mean, a higher level of godly reality, right? Ultimately. So let's see. We'll go with two more lines and then we'll stop. It's through something beyond both. Move on. Therefore, it's understood. This joining together of the upper realms and the lower realms that happened at the time of Matan Torah, at Matan Torah, Haisam Shoches Orein-Sev Shelamayla Migeder Demayla Umata. There was a revelation, a drawing down of a level of godly reality that's beyond the geder, beyond the definition of above and below. El Yonim V'Tachtenim. Meaning beyond the definition of spiritual and physical. Now, ultimately, we're going to be able to say, right, we know this already, beyond the definition of infinite, finite. Right? Elyon is generally infinite. Finite is, the Tachtein is generally finite. Okay, there's going to be something beyond both that can bring about the synthesis of both. Now, I just want you to see this line, then we'll stop. But this is very, very important because the whole mimer is based on this. We'll pick up from this tomorrow. When we call them move on, therefore we understand in Matan Torah there's three things. Shebaha mitzvahs shela'achrei Matan Torah Gimmel inyanim. Hatachton, the lower reality, sheregam la'achrei Matan Torah, even after Matan Torah, shadavar gashmi, that this physical object should be mekayim mitzvah, that with it you're fulfilling the mitzvah, nasa chefza shel mitzvah, can become a chefza shel mitzvah, loy nefach leruchni, it's not transformed into something spiritual, the nishar davar gashmi, still stays a physical object, remains a physical object. We'll talk about this more tomorrow, but the Rebbe is saying an incredible chiddush in the chibur of Elyon and Tachton. Up until now, whenever we talked about the chibur of Elyon and Tachton, we generally talked about the fact that the Elyon will be mevatel the Tachton. Talked about that a lot. Seiva will be mevatel the mamale. Now the Rebbe is saying no. The Tachton stays Tachton. It's just connected to Elyon, but it stays Tachton. The physical object doesn't stop being physical, right? Simple shot. You shake a lulav, it doesn't disappear in your hands, which is really astounding, right? Ha'elyon, shahare gam la'achrei, matan Torah, even after matan Torah, kedushas ha-mitzvah, when the holiness of the mitzvah nimsheches is drawn down v'nikvas and established b'hadavar gashmi in the physical object, still hu inyan ruchni. It's not that it's transformed into gashmias. It's still ruchni. The gashmias stays gashmias, and the ruchnias stays ruchnias. There's an elyon and there's a tachton, and they stay elyon and tachton. Va'bittel, then there's a third level. And the bittel shall gidrei elyon v'tachton. The nullification of the whole notion of upper realm and lower realm. The zeh she'elyon v'tachton mischabrim zeh im zeh, that which the upper realm and the lower realm join together, even though they're opposites, while they bittel ageder shalem. It's through the nullification of the definition of them as Elyon and Tachton, which is brought about through drawing down or Ein Sof, which is beyond both. Okay, but the Rebbe just said a huge kiddush. You're not mevatel the Elyon and the Tachton by virtue of the gilui of a level beyond both. Both of them stay what they are, but they now also transcend what they are simultaneously. The Elyon transcends being Elyon such that it can connect to Tachton. The Tachton transcends being Tachton such that it can connect to Elyon. But the Elyon is still Elyon and the Tachton is still Tachton. And then there's a third level, which is the bittul of both of them. Wow.
Both of them?
Well,
Even that Elyon?
yeah, Vaday. Yeah, if the Elyon connects to the Tachton, it's not Elyon anymore, is it? Oh, no, but it is. So those are the three levels of Matan Torah. And we're going to understand, the Rebbe is going to explain mitzvahs on those three levels, Torah on those three levels, and the mitzvah of Talmud Torah on those three levels. And the chiddush is, especially in terms of what we saw, what we've seen, that the gili of the Elyon isn't mevatel the Tachton, and the gili of the Tachton isn't mevatel the Elyon. And that's the chiddush of Matan Torah, the Rebbe says.
It's amazing.
Let's see. Yeah, it's a huge chiddush. It's unbelievable. Okay, let's see. We'll go from there tomorrow. Anytime we ran into bittul. The Rebbe's not talking about bittul. You'll see what he's talking about. There is bittul, but there's something higher. It's amazing. And this is the beginning of it all, right? This is Tafshin Yud Aleph.